Hi, so I'm Helen Whedon, the Managing Director of the Satcoms Innovation Group, and I'm here with Andrew Bond, Sales and Marketing Director for ETL Systems. Hi, Andrew.
Hello, Helen. Thank you very much for inviting me to join you.
Not at all, good to see you. So, Andrew, we're obviously all aware of the remarkable acceleration of LEO constellations. From your perspective, how are ground networks changing to meet a new set of requirements?
That's a very good question, and one which is very relevant to ground segment manufacturers and designers like ETL Systems. So just to give you a background, I'm sitting here in our Hereford office, and we have been obviously locked down working from our UK sites for some time. But our engineers are still on site, and actually we've put together a team which is now specializing in the new future of LEO ground stations, and we're incredibly interested in how these designs will look as the constellations are launched and come online. So, in our understanding, we're very much embedded in traditional ground stations, traditional switching for GEO and MEO constellations seems to be our bread and butter. So we've got to be versatile and adaptable to not only work with new frequencies, new signal levels, and new types of antennas and new types of switching. So that has really meant that we've put together a new LEO engineering team so that we can respond to the sort of designs that these new LEO constellations need. Obviously, we're aware that the fixed antennas are going to be superseded with a form of tracking antenna technology, whether that's a steerable antenna or it's a programmable antenna. We're not too sure, but we're watching those very intently. But as a result of that, there's going to be a lot of traffic overhead, and these antennas need to switch seamlessly and very quickly and make sure that they've got an uninterrupted uplink and downlink. And that's what some of our new designs of switches at L-band can do, so which is interesting. Certainly, we've got to move, and I'll make this point again several times probably, we've got to move within budget, because these satellites don't cost quite as much as the big GEO satellites. So our budget and size of products needs to be much smaller as well. But we've got good experience, for example, in the maritime market, which uses similar technology, where we work well with cruise liners and super yachts in the oil industry, where VSAT networks are constantly changing and often use the likes of CTEL antennas, which are quite similar in technology to what we envisage the LEO antennas will look like.
It's certainly an interesting time to be involved with the ground segment, definitely. So how do you scale up then to meet growth objectives and demand while reducing that cost per unit to an acceptable level and without compromising things like redundancy and resilience?
We're very lucky. Over the last 5 or 6 years, we have bought a lot of, ETL Systems has bought a lot of its design and production in-house. We now run 3 very large surface mount lines for printed circuit boards. We have in-house testing. We have 25 people in the test team and RF design team. So that has meant that we can respond very quickly as these new constellations come online, and we can adapt our legacy products, our big RF matrices, which have been used in the GEO world, to use the same technology to a smaller rack space and a better operating platform. The other thing as well is this market is tough. I mentioned before about the cost objectives. Certainly, we're seeing people wanting high volumes, low cost. So one constellation may require 20 to 30 ground stations, all of different designs. So we may well have completely different ground segment switching designs for uplink and downlink traffic for different constellations. So again, we've got to be flexible, whether that's OneWeb or Telesat or Starlink or Project Kuiper.
So obviously 5G and IoT are big words right now and being bandished around. And with those technologies threatening a exponential increase in data traffic, what role will satellites play, and how can network operators prepare now for that incoming deluge?
Well, I think this is another good question, and I've said this certainly on this platform, and certainly some of the very good discussions that we've had at that SIG has had at various shows. I think the growth in data is exponential. IoT is not new; it's been around for a while. LEO is going to be very crowded, so the first thing we're worried about initially is the crowded skies. Interference is a concern, so I think that's a major play for the network operators, and how these constellations will work in harmony. And again, we are sitting back watching how the regulators actually allow these to work in harmony. And I think it does need a lot more governance and guidance by a regulatory body, and operational parameters as these constellations come online, these LEO constellations come online, will need to be very strict and very controlled. Certainly ground stations we will see a lot more computing power, so they'll become much more of uplink, downlink data centers. So I think network operators can prepare by looking at the potential future requirements and the ability to scale up as constellations come online. So that scalability is probably the key thing. Certainly the RF switches to switch between antennas and provide redundancy are all going to be scalable. So we may only start with 2 or 3 satellites at these dishes at these ground stations, but we will soon scale up to many more as you get 3,000-4,000 satellites within a constellation. So scalability, I think, is important, and again, that magic word, cost.
So of course the other thing is secure communication, which is becoming increasingly important across the entire network. So how can operators future-proof their operations?
Well, I think certainly 5G and satellite is a fantastic piece of news for the satellite industry, because at last we're going to be working in harmony with telecoms, albeit we're going to be carrying data rather than our traditional imagery that GEO's been handling. So bandwidth is going to increase with the amount of data that's going to be handled. And as a result of this harmony between a ground segment and a space segment, we're going to need to have the latest secure protocol. So embedded into the majority of our new switches, whether that's fiber links or redundancy switches or actual amplification, we are putting in SNMP v3 to ensure that the best and latest secure protocol is there to ensure that people who have access should have access, and those that shouldn't. If you know what I mean.
Absolutely. Thanks, Andrew. So finally, what do you envisage to be the biggest challenges for the industry over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I go back to the point I've been making all the way through. I think it's cost. I think the mindset of producing a LEO satellite has been one that it's cheap and cheerful, and therefore the ground segment should reflect the cost of a LEO satellite. Hence the fact that it's certainly been interesting in our discussions with some of the LEO operators that we've been, it's been surprising how much the ground segment is actually costing in proportion to a LEO satellite. And I think that's one that possibly for some wasn't in their original cost estimations. So we have got to make sure that the RF switches and the RF handling devices that we're producing are within that budget, but also deliver good RF performance as well. So we've got to balance our historical legacy products that we've been using in traditional teleports with these new ground segments. And we spend a lot of money on R&D. I mean, it's been nearly a year since we started our new Hawk matrix design. We've now got 4 designs for those, and the first ones have been built and shipped for test beds. And that R&D needs to be looked after and invested in. So, we've got to spread that cost over these new LEO constellations. So we've been around for a long time, as you know, Helen. ETL have been in business for 30 years. We've got about 75 engineers in this company. There's 150 of us, so we're in a very good place to actually move with the market. And I think to have invest in good R&D to go with these new constellations, it's going to be great for companies like ETL to respond quickly. It's going to be quite a challenge for new companies to keep up, because I think traditional ways of running a teleport are going to change, and I think it's going to be the flexible, versatile, nimble companies that are going to succeed in the future.
Absolutely. I certainly think there's some exciting times ahead for ETL, and I look forward to keeping on tracking them with interest.
Okay. Thank you very much, Helen. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. You too.